you're here in the sanctuary or watching from the library or at home, it is wonderful for us to be together. And we still have some folks gathering in, so as people come in, welcome. Take your seats. As we gather together this morning and we settle in for the hour, I share the words of Heather Rion Starr. May they help center our hearts and our minds for worship, for lifting up that which is of worth. On this day, as with so many Sundays, we come in from the whirling wind, the whirling world, the bright sun, the push and pull of tides and time, the tumult of global news and local news stories, the pain we hear of, the demands on our spirits, the do this now culture that we live in. We come into this sanctuary from that windstorm, the rush of speeding drivers on the roadways, the rustling silence that fills some of our homes, the vastness of a once busy and perhaps now quieter house. All of this during this time can leave us feeling stirred and unsettled. When we give our attention to what's going on around and beyond us in this throbbing world, we can feel wind blown. We need places where we can come and find our grounding once again. Come in from the wind, come in from the whirl. May this be a place where we can experience genuine stillness, even just for a few moments. May this be a place that we can count on as we pass through the doors into this meeting room, this sanctuary, or as we turn on our computers and come seeking our fellowship YouTube page. May we feel pulled into a restorative time of energetic peace. May this be a place of learning, of nourishment, a community that generates a new zest in us for the dynamic beauty of this world. Come and let us worship together.
It's time for us to light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. This morning, we remember the origin of our flaming chalice as a symbol of Unitarian and Universalist efforts to help people escape persecution and find safety during the Second World War. May it always serve as a beacon of hope. Would a volunteer be willing to come forward and help light the candle? Here, come on. Yeah, both good. There you go.
How about all three?
Here, you guys know what you do.
Please rise now as you're able for our chalice lighting words, which will be on the screen. They're on the screen. Let's say them together as our chalice is lit. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now please remain standing for our opening hymn. Our opening hymn today is number 1 in your gray hymnal, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. Good morning. I'm Steve Runyon, your worship associate today. Welcome to Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Welcome especially to any newcomers and returning members here with us today. I invite you to fill out a welcome card after the service to help you get connected with us. You can also talk to today's welcome ambassador, Andrea Zugale, who would love to meet you and answer any questions. Andrea, can you stand up? Or wave your hand. There, okay, in the green. Thank you. We are a community of many ages, but we all worship together. You can join us in many ways on Sundays, including online, here in our sanctuary, which we call our meeting room, or from our library right outside our sanctuary, right out to the left. The library is an especially good place if you or a loved one need a space to talk or get all of the wiggles out. Our service is live streamed there, so you won't miss anything. As you know, we also hope to begin offering childcare during services in the near future. How many of you would like to volunteer to offer this important service to our families? Don't be shy, raise those hands. Okay, well, think about it. Okay, I think I saw one. Okay, terrific. Okay, well, we only need now, I guess, 2 more. So think about it, and if you decide you want to do it, please talk to Reverend Sasha or to Nick. There are always many things going on here at Morristown UU that you can participate in. This morning, I'd like to draw your particular attention to 3 items. The opening of registration for Reverend Sasha's starting point class for new UUs and newcomers to the fellowship. That is upcoming. Are there more details about that?
In the order of service.
In the order of service. Okay, sorry. I don't know if I may have deleted part of that sentence when I was looking at these notes. Today is the deadline to return the holiday gifts you purchased for our annual Giving Tree collection. The Giving Tree is right out in the entryway there. And after the service today, there is a special congregational meeting to vote on our proposed solar project budget to bring solar power here to Morristown UU. Judy Bjorklund has raised an announcement. There will be a free down-home holiday concert this Wednesday, December 11th, at the Morris Plains Presbyterian Church at 7 o'clock, and it is a real hoot. It features the Morris Plains Volunteer Band and a choral group. 3 of we UUs are in it. There are band numbers, sing-alongs, and musical favorites, guaranteed to be a joy. So if you are into having a hoot this Wednesday, please head on over to Morristown Presbyterian. Morris Plains Presbyterian. Today, we're also pleased to announce that this year's auction fundraiser raised over $33,000, one of our best results ever. So now the time has come to pick up your winning items and settle your accounts. Electronic statements were sent to every participant, and you can pick up paper statements at the auction table during social hour. Payments can be made by check or through Venmo or Realm. And finally, our lay pastoral care associates are available today in the library after the service to speak with anyone who finds yourself in need of a caring presence and a listening ear this morning. You'll be able to recognize them by the blue sashes they're wearing. Once again, welcome, and we are glad that you're here. Now we're going to have time for all ages.
I got a story for you all. Come on up. Not really anyone who wants to come, but kids especially. Come here. No? Okay. You going to play? That's fine. There's no rules. Okay. I'm going to tell a story, and we're going to have a 1-minute discussion about what it's about. So I can stick with my time. All right. So here's the story. It's called Sophia's Guest. Once upon a time, there was a teacher named Sophia. Nearly everyone in town knew Sophia and loved her because not only was she an excellent teacher, but she was also very kind. And one day, when Sophia got to work, she found a note on her desk. And the note read, Sophia, I will be around tomorrow, and I wonder if I might stop by your house for tea tomorrow afternoon. Your friend, God. And at first, Sophia thought it was a joke. But she could not think of anyone who would play a joke on her like that. And then she thought, what if it wasn't a joke? What if God really was going to come to her house tomorrow afternoon? And Sophia thought she should get ready just in case. So on her way home from work, she stopped by the store and bought one of those mats that people put out on their porch, and it says, in big letters, welcome. It's our next slide. There it is, okay. And when she got home, she cleaned the house from top to bottom and bought some fresh flowers from the garden and put them in a vase in the living room. And in the morning, Sophia realized that she didn't know what God liked to eat. So she baked some bread and made a casserole and fruit salad and baked some cookies too. And what about tea? Did God like hot tea or iced tea? She thought she better make both. And that if God's favorite thing in the whole world was lemonade, well, she thought she might make some of that too. She was so nervous. She didn't know what to expect. And just then, there was a knock on the door. And Sophia's heart went pat, pat, pat. And she took a big breath and opened the door slowly. On the other side was the mayor of the town. Hello, Sophia. I was walking by your house, and it smelled of delicious baked bread. And Sophia said, I'm so glad you're here. Come in, come in. I'm expecting a very important visitor who you might want to meet. But come in and make yourself at home. And Sophia and the mayor sat, and they had a nice discussion. And then there was another knock on the door. And Sophia's heart went pat, pat, pat. And she took a deep breath and opened the door slowly. And on the other side was a group of children from her class. Hello, Miss Sophia. We were walking by and we noticed the smell of fresh baked cookies. And Sophia said, well, I'm glad you're here. Come in, come in. I'm expecting a very important visitor that you might actually want to meet, but please come in and have some cookies. And the children were giving the mayor some much needed advice. It sounds like something you children would do. When there was another knock on the door. And Sophia's heart went pat, pat, pat. A deep breath, she opened the door, and the entire women's covenant group from the fellowship was there. Sophia, we heard the tea kettle and the laughter, and we thought you might be having a party. And Sophia said, I'm glad you're here. Come in, come in. I'm expecting a very important visitor, but you might want to meet them too. So please come in and make yourself at home. And all afternoon, people stopped by until the townspeople filled Sophia's house. And as they got hungry, they made dinner together and ate, and the sun set and the moon rose. And it was a great party, and people were playing games and telling stories and baking and playing music and talking together. And as Sophia waved goodbye to her friends, at the end of the night, she felt only contentment for having such a lovely party. And in the morning, Sophia woke up and remembered everything, but she was confused. Whatever happened to God? All during her walk to work, she tried to figure out what had happened. Where God didn't show up. The women's group did, the mayor did, the kids did. But where was God? And when she got to work, she got another note. And it said, Dear Sophia, I had such a wonderful time yesterday. The bread was delicious, the cookies were divine, the tea mixed with lemonade is my very favorite. Thank you for being such a wonderful host. I hope we can do it again. Love, God. So what do you think? Did God show up at the party? How did God show up at the party? What was the story in there? It was the kids and the mayor and the women's covenant group and other people. Right? The thing is that no matter who's coming over to your house, we always got to kind of be ready for welcome, right? To welcome people over, right? Even if we got these plans, right? Sophia had this very important plan, this very important date. And it turned out that God was in everyone who came over, right? And so God showed up in the story, right? And so Sophia was ready and invited people in, even though God didn't look like what she probably thought God looked like, right? And had a fun time anyway, right? So we're going to be ready? Host people, welcome people? Very good. All right, let's go back to our seats. 5 minutes.
We've come now to the time in our service when we pause to offer our gifts of financial support to this congregation. Your donations make all that we do here together possible and also help make our wider community a better place. That's because each Sunday we give at least half of the money we collect to an organization that is doing good work to advance our Unitarian Universalist values of love, justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. Today's offering will be split 50-50 with Homeless Solutions, helping the homeless and at-risk community of Morris County. You may give in our collection plate or by following the instructions printed in your order of service and shown on the screen. Thanks in advance for your generosity.
It's now time for our milestones and passages. You know, sometimes we come to this place on Sunday mornings with a whole lot in our hearts. Maybe your family welcomed a new baby. Maybe you lost a loved one. Maybe you got a new job, or you lost a job, or you have a health concern. Whatever your joy, sorrow, or concern, you can share it in our service by filling out one of our milestones and passages forms, which you can do either by filling out one of these cards on your way through the doors, or by filling out the form that's online, and there's a link in the newsletter and on our website. This morning, we have just a couple things to share. Alan Wells shares, we send healing wishes to Gloria Friedman and to Pat De La Fuente, each of whom recently fell and broke an arm. Our wishes for a speedy and full recovery. And this morning, I also have a gratitude to share with you. This is actually for this lovely person who's over here on piano for us today, Beth. Beth is beginning our first day today as our interim music director. Now let's just take a quiet moment together for the prayers and meditations of our own hearts. So go ahead now. This is a good time for us to practice a little bit of meditation. Go ahead and close your eyes. Let yourself settle into that chair. Get comfy. Place your feet on the ground below you. Feel the earth below your feet. Take some time breathing deep into your belly. Let yourself feel the movement of the air through you. Hear the breaths of those around you. Hear this community holding you, this life all around you. Feel the spirit of life holding all of us in this moment together. Let's go ahead now and take 3 deep breaths in unison. In and out. And in deep into our bellies and out. And in once more and out. And then we'll settle into a moment of silence. Amen and blessed be. And now let's go ahead and remain seated as we sing a song together. It's number 18 in your gray hymnal, What Wondrous Love. And some of you may recognize this as a traditional Advent tune with a little bit of different words for our community.
Our reading this morning is The Church Has Left the Building by Margaret Weiss. How many of you have heard that name? Fantasy novelist? Yes, different Margaret Weiss. I thought the same thing. Margaret Weiss, the novelist, lives in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, which is the home of Dungeons & Dragons, in case you were wondering. Reverend Margaret Weiss is the chaplain at Cornell University in Ithaca. Reverend Weiss invites us to consider the meaning of the word church. It's a word that has an interesting history in our Unitarian Universalist tradition. Today, we sometimes think of a church as a building, as a physical place people go to worship together. It can sound exclusively Christian to us sometimes too, perhaps bringing to mind images of steeples or crosses. And so for that reason, some UUs and even some UU congregations shy away from the word church. Others embrace it or adopt an understanding of it that aligns more with our Unitarian Universalist values and identity. Because of our unique Unitarian and Universalist heritage, the word church comes to us through its own particular and perhaps peculiar lineage. It may feel a little weird, but recall that Unitarian Universalism has Puritan forebears. We're basically the Protestant Reformation that never stopped reforming. But that's a whole nother topic for another day. So anyway, our Puritan forebears saw a church not as a building and not as a group of people bound together by a creed to believe this or that, but instead they saw a church as a group of people bound together by a covenant, by a promise to walk together. Of course, back then they had very different ideas than we do today of what it means to walk together, to choose one another as our companions for a spiritual journey. But through a long and winding road, we inherited the term church from them and the idea of a covenant to walk together, a promise to be together with one another in this community in a particular kind of way, a promise to accompany one another and join together on a spiritual journey. And so, reflecting on this distinction between church as building and church as people accompanying one another on a spiritual journey, Reverend Margaret Weiss writes, "The church is not a place, it is a people. The church is not only a steeple above the tree lines, streets, and cars. Rather, it is a people proclaiming to the world that we are here for the work of healing and justice. The church is not walls built stone upon stone, held together by mortar, but rather person, linked with person, linked with person. All ages and genders and abilities, a community built on the foundation of reason, faith, and love. The church is not just a set of doors open on Sunday morning, but the commitment day after day and moment after moment of our hearts creaking open the doors of welcome to the possibility of new experience and radical welcome. The church is not simply a building, a steeple, a pew. The church is the gathering together of all the people and experiences and fear and love and hope in our resilient hearts, gathering however we can to say to the world, welcome, come in, lay down your heartache, and pick up hope and love. For the church is us, each and every one of us together, a beacon of hope to this world that so sorely needs it."
As some of you know, the Advent season is upon us, and during my time away this past week, or the week before, for my quarterly week of study leave, I went with my partner Smokey to visit the United Methodists, our religious neighbors who are part of the Morristown Interfaith Clergy Council with us. And their sanctuary was beautiful. It was all decked out for the Advent season. There were wreaths and garlands, Advent candles, and more. Now, for Christians, Advent is a season of waiting, not just waiting for the birth of Jesus on Christmas Eve, but waiting for the arrival of Emmanuel. Emmanuel is a Hebrew word that means God with us. And when I think about the idea of Emmanuel, the idea of God with us, the idea of the sacred manifesting among us, I am reminded of a Bible passage. And believe it or not, today's sermon was inspired by the Bible passage before I even remembered that, hey, minister, this is Advent season, silly. This is what happens when you come from a non-Christian background. The passage comes to us from Scripture. To be precise, it's from Christian Scripture, the book of Matthew, chapter 18, which is not a part of the Bible about Advent or even Christmas, I know. I was surprised a little bit by the fact that that's what sparked this sermon, and that it was not Advent that sparked it as well. If you haven't spent much time among Unitarian Universalists before now, I imagine you're probably scratching your head a little bit at the moment. After all, among our Christian neighbors, sermons are always, or at least almost always, about the Bible. And this season, too, is always, or at least almost always, about Jesus and Advent and the approach of Christmas. So why am I finding it kind of surprising that I'm talking about the Bible and Jesus today? But you see, for Unitarian Universalists, it's a bit different than it is for our Christian neighbors. We draw spiritual inspiration from many different sources. The Bible is one of them, but so too are the scriptures and holidays as well from other world religions. In fact, probably about half of our congregation are from a Jewish background, and many still find Judaism personally meaningful. Others here are Buddhist, pagan, humanist, agnostic, atheist, and more. We are a very diverse bunch theologically, and we also frequently draw inspiration from the arts, from human experience, from science and earth-centered traditions, from justice makers, their words and their actions, and much more. So I believe that this, and maybe somebody can correct me on this, but I believe this may be the first time that this congregation has heard me talk about Scripture here from the pulpit since my arrival in August. But it's good for us to take some time now and then to explore these ancient texts together, and this is a really good season for it, so we're going to be doing that a little bit this month. So, in Matthew chapter 18, what's happening is that Jesus has sat down with his disciples to have a little chat, among other things, the times that he will be with them in spirit. And he gives a few examples of that, the times when he will be with them in spirit, kind of echoing that idea of Emmanuel, of God with us, right? And one such time that he tells the disciples he will be with them is whenever they welcome little children among them. When they welcome little ones, they welcome him, he says, just like in our story for all ages earlier. And another time, he says, and this is the one I'm focusing in on today, another time he says he will be with them in spirit is whenever they come together as a group or even in pairs in his name. And he says to the disciples, where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them. This is an interesting passage for us as Unitarian Universalists. So what are we supposed to make of it? So although there are some exceptions in every UU congregation, most of us do not believe that Jesus was God, or at least not in the same sense that most of our Christian neighbors mean. In fact, that's the classical definition of Unitarianism. Unitarianism is the belief in the oneness of God, and it's a rejection of the Trinity, especially in the divinity of Christ. We believe that Jesus was a wise teacher, but that he was fully human and not divine. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't consider him sacred, and more on that later. Most of us believe that Jesus was one wise teacher among many teachers that the ages have given us. A few of us perhaps even believe that he was the wisest teacher, the one that we personally choose to follow. There's a variety of beliefs among us. But our tradition also honors teachers like Hillel, Buddha, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and even more modern teachers like Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And there are many beliefs about Jesus among us, many different places that he occupies within our own individual lives. But few Unitarian Universalists believe that Jesus was divine. So if he was not God, then what does the passage that I shared a little while ago mean to us, if anything? And one way to interpret it is that Jesus was reassuring his disciples that he would be with them in spirit whenever they came together, even if he was not there with them physically. Where 2 or 3 are gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them, he said. And whenever I remember this passage, I'm reminded, interestingly enough, of memorial services. It's kind of funny that my mind goes first to memorial services to death instead of Emmanuel, the idea of God living among us, but brains are kind of funny things. So a few weeks ago, you may recall that I told you that when I officiate memorial services, we light our chalice as a memorial flame for the person who died. And at the end of the service, when we extinguish the memorial flame, I say, "Though we have extinguished this chalice, let us be confident that such love as hers never touched the face of this earth without creating something eternal. Her bright spirit radiates still through our world and through our own lives, and let us seek, therefore, to let our lives be her legacy, for her light is now ours to carry forward out into this world. Let us seek to celebrate her lives and the lives we now lead. For we are her honor and her memorial. Her love we now carry forward as we are now her voice, her hands, and her heart." Now, I've noticed something really special to me personally during the memorial services that I've attended as well as those that I've led over the years. Because each time I am struck by how much I feel the presence of the person who died while I am there with those who loved them the most. And I don't mean that in a supernatural way. I don't mean that I feel their ghost or something like that. But instead what I mean is there are powerful echoes there in that room, in the presence of the people there and the stories that they tell, in the memories that they share, and even in the way that they treat one another as they grieve and honor their loved one together. And for a holy hour, I feel like I really know the person who died, who, even though I sometimes never had the privilege in life of knowing them, their presence is almost tangible there in that room. It's like the service brings them to life there among us just for a time. And so whenever I read the passage I just shared from the book of Matthew, I think of it like that. In the story, Jesus knew he was going to die. Perhaps he knew that his death would come soon. After all, he was up to some pretty risky business, preaching against the Roman occupation and other violent authorities of his time, right? He knew that resistance could cost him his life, but whether he knew that his death was near or whether he only knew that his time would eventually come, just as it eventually comes for us all, he knew he wouldn't be with his disciples forever. And so he told them that even when he was no longer with them, if they continued to gather together in honor of him and follow his teachings together, that he would be with them in spirit. Where there are 2 or 3 gathered together in my name, I am there in the midst of them, he said. Now, back when I was in seminary preparing to become a Unitarian Universalist minister, one of my professors said something that sparked my imagination and was meaningful for me as someone who does not come from a Christian background, someone who was trying to make sense of what meaning Jesus' teachings and life might have in my own life. He encouraged us to consider that Jesus' real resurrection wasn't in body, but rather in his early followers and in the community that grew out of his teachings. And he suggested that Jesus lived on in them. Jesus was resurrected in them. His mission to confront the injustice of his time, liberate people from occupation and tyranny, and establish a more egalitarian and loving society, that mission was resurrected in his followers after his death. And that was how he remained present with them after he passed away. You see, something holy can happen when we come together in community. A sacred presence can manifest among us. A loving and healing presence can manifest in times of sorrow when we come together to grieve someone who died. A forgiving and reconciling presence can manifest in times of conflict when we come together to mend our relationships. A liberating presence can manifest in times of social turmoil when we come together in service of our mission and our values. There is a presence among us, one greater than the sum of our parts when we come together in sacred community. Now, when I was a choir kid back in the day, we used to play around with being more than the sum of our parts. Each day as a vocal exercise, our teacher directed us in creating something really neat called overtones. And overtones are this almost magical thing when they happen, when 4 pitches come together and they align with each other just right, they can produce a 5th higher pitch. And technically, the 5th pitch, the overtone, isn't created by sound waves. In a way, it's actually created by brain waves. The overtone is something known as a psychoacoustic effect. It emerges from this dynamic interaction between the singer's voices and the listener's minds. They co-create this pure high note that we hear floating in an almost heavenly way above all the others. And when we come together as a spiritual community, something like that emerges from within our midst, something magical, almost like these overtones that transcends our separate individual selves. This co-created presence, it manifests among us in a tangible way when we are together, in body or in spirit, and from it we can draw strength and find inspiration. Let's go ahead now and pause for a moment to sing together before continuing our sermon. Let's go ahead and remain seated for this one and sing just the first verse of hymn number 346 in your gray hymnal, Come Sing a Song with Me. One of the things that I hope you will all experience here on Sunday mornings for worship, at least sometimes, is a sense of the sacred. Now, I know that worship and sacred are somewhat controversial words for some of us, especially those of us who don't believe in God or who are leery of anything that sounds too religious. I'm throwing a lot of these kinds of words at you today, aren't I? Worship, sacred, church, Jesus, they're in Bible verses, where are we? But just as Unitarian Universalism has its own understanding of the word church going back at least a few hundred years, we also have our own understanding of words like worship and sacred. These two words are similar, in fact. Worship comes from an old West Saxon word that means to lift up that which is of worth. And the word sacred just means that which is worthy of honor, set apart and worthy of honor. That which is worthy of being lifted up. And so on Sunday mornings, then, we lift up that which is of worth. We worship that which is sacred to us. Now, we can think of lifting up the sacred as sort of like a spiritual show and tell, I guess. The minister or perhaps one of our talented worship associates comes up here to the pulpit and lifts up a few good ideas for us to consider, like a school child, lifting up a favorite toy, perhaps, for classmates to admire during show and tell. Everyone looks and listens, examining it together. But I don't just want us to come here to consider things that are of worth. I don't want us to just look and listen to ideas about the sacred. I want us to touch it, to feel it as we are here together. I want it to rise up within us and among us. I want us to work together to lift it up. I want us to even to co-create it together. And there are many ways that we can co-create the sacred here among us on Sunday so that it is a tangible presence for us to all touch and experience for ourselves. Sometimes we create it together when we sing together. Not all congregations are singing congregations, but this one, thankfully, is. And there is a certain kind of energy sometimes that moves among us when we lift our voices together. I feel it. I hope some of you do too. And at other times, we may feel and create together a sense of the sacred when we hold silence together. When we settle down into our seats and still our bodies and just breathe together for a few moments, we can create a space together where we can feel the life energy pulsing within this room, and also where our hearts, minds, and spirits can settle into a sense of peace for a while. We can also create a sense of the sacred together by how we treat one another here in this community. We do it all the time when we say hello and we sit down with newcomers when they arrive in this sanctuary for the very first time or even for the 10th time, and have some conversations with them after the service during social hour. We do it all the time when we offer a kind smile and patience when our children act like children during worship. We do it every time we offer encouragement instead of criticism, when we pause before offering corrections and advice. We create a sacred space with one another here when we go the extra mile to make one another feel welcome, especially those who are new among us, and especially when it sometimes feels inconvenient or uncomfortable for us to take the risk of reaching out and making space for someone and welcoming them in fully. We create a sacred presence for one another here when we offer listening ears and hands to hold to those among us who are going through a hard time. And we even create a sacred presence here for one another when we are brave and trusting enough to share our hard times with one another, inviting one another to witness the tenderest parts of our lives and accompany us through them. And whenever it happens for you personally, I hope that each and every one of you get a chance to experience the sacred here when you are among us. And I hope that together we will work together to co-create it in our midst as a tangible presence that we can touch and feel. Now let's go ahead and pause again once more and take some time this time to stretch our bodies. Let's go ahead and rise in body or spirit. And we're going to sing the second verse of our hymn. Again, it's number 346. One of the ways that we can co-create a sense of the sacred among us, one tangible enough for us to each touch and feel, is by treating each and every person here among us as though they are sacred. Just like in the story that we heard Nick share earlier. Treat them as though they are sacred because they are. Nick's story reminds me of another story, a more traditional story. It's about a Jewish village long, long ago, and it goes something like this. Once upon a time, there was a village that had fallen on hard times, and all of the villagers were worried about the future of their village. Many people had wandered away to bigger and wealthier villages and even to cities, and the dwindling population was aging. They were not sure how their village would survive in the long haul, let alone thrive. And anxious people are not always able to be their best selves. The villagers began bickering among themselves, and big fights broke out over pretty small things, and people had a hard time showing each other respect and patience when they encountered one another's very human failings. And if there was an opportunity to criticize, they took it, and it felt good. And there was an opportunity to blame, they took it, and they thought they felt better. But still, suspicion and anger simmered within the community. Small groups began to look at the village with suspicion and disdain, convinced that the other villagers around them couldn't be trusted and they were up to no good. And when new people sometimes made their way to the village, they were treated like inconveniences at best and interlopers at worst, rather than like cherished neighbors and guests among them. And one day, an old man sat sad and discouraged by a well in the village square, and he saw a stranger approaching down the road with an empty cup in her hand. "Here," the old man said, reaching for the cup, "let me offer you a little water. It's best that you don't take it yourself." "Thank you," the stranger said, watching carefully as the old man, frowning, drew some water up out of the bucket and then poured it into her cup. "Why the long face?" she asked. And the old man sighed. "Many of the people here might turn you away if you tried to drink from our well," he said. He grimaced. "They've become a bit inhospitable even to each other and especially to outsiders. There's a lot of suspicion here and anxiety." The stranger hummed. And then she said something odd and amazing. She said, "May I share a secret with you? It's a secret you may have trouble believing, but it is key to everything that this village hopes and dreams of together. And that secret is this: one of the villagers is actually the Messiah." And the old man was so stunned by what he heard that he just stood there like with his jaw gaping open and stared as the stranger finished her water and just walked away with a whistle. And when the old man went home, he told his husband what he had heard. "Really?" his husband said doubtfully. "Someone here is the Messiah, in this village?" "Yes," he said. "That's what she said." "Our village. This one," her husband went on, unable to believe it. "Yes," he said. And as sometimes can happen in villages, it didn't take long for the news to spread. "Someone here is the Messiah," the baker told the doctor. "The Messiah is someone here in this village," the doctor told the rabbi. "The Messiah is among us," the rabbi told everyone at Shabbat. But by then, everyone already knew. Something began to stir among the villagers as they continued sharing and considering the news. Every time they encountered another person in the village, they wondered, could he be the Messiah? Could they? Maybe it was the farmer. Maybe it was one of the little school children. Maybe it was the rat catcher. No one knew who it was. And so, little by little, they began treating one another as though each person, each and every one of them, might be the Messiah. And before long, the village was transformed. People started treating their neighbors with trust and respect. The bickering finally ended, replaced by listening and encouragement and reconciliation. The villagers offered each other helping hands instead of harsh words. And as months passed, the people began to see new people move to the village where they were offered warm hospitality. People bent over backward to make the newcomers feel as welcome as possible, and it was no surprise that the village started to grow. By the end of the year, the village square, once a place of tension, now hosted joyful parties to celebrate the thriving community. And so, my friends, when we treat one another as holy, the sacred can dwell among us. May we be a congregation that chooses to companion one another on our shared spiritual journey. May we witness and respond to the sacred that dwells within each and every person. And may the sacred manifest among us as a powerful, loving, joyful, and hopeful presence, shining in the world for all to see, now and always. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so. And now let's go ahead and rise in body or spirit, sing the final two verses of our hymn. Again, it's 348. Please be seated. It's time now for us to bring our time of worship to a close, but as we extinguish this chalice flame, its light will continue to burn in our hearts. And as we go out into our daily lives, I leave you with the words of Ben Atherton Zeman. As we extinguish this flame on our chalice, we ignite it within ourselves. Our commitment to our mission and to one another is an unquenchable flame. Let us remember that we are not alone until we light this flame next time. Amen. Blessed be, and go in peace, but make sure you stay for the vote after the service.